Our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, has attended what essentially amounts to a Labor Party fundraiser at the Point Piper mansion of the son of a Chinese billionaire. And some would say a controversial one at that. But it doesn't end there. This fundraiser, and we'll talk about the quantum raised in a moment, but this fundraiser included some titans from Australian business as well. And guess what? At the moment at least, the Prime Minister and his staff won't disclose the details. They say that will all come in due course as per political donations requirements. But that means we won't find out about this until April 2027. It just exposes how ridiculous fundraising provisions are. Now for the sting in the tail. What was the amount of money that was raised as a result of the Prime Minister essentially prostituting his time to some fundraising activities? Well, reports suggest that $1 million was the amount that was raised for the Labor Party. Sources apparently deny that. They say that the quantum is closer to $100,000. But really the amount doesn't matter here. It's the look, it's the perception. It may well not be a case of buying influence within the government, but it is absolutely the case that these people are buying access to the Prime Minister. He wasn't there because of his scintillating personality. He was there because of his power. And what we don't know is what transpired behind closed doors. It's the perception that this just isn't right. I wish I could tell you that this was a once-off, or that all political parties don't do this. But alas, that's not true. This is a bipartisan problem, to be sure. The only difference at the moment is that Labor's in power and the coalition are not only in opposition, but they're fighting for their political lives. It's harder to raise money out of corporate Australia and from the big end of town when you don't look like getting into government anytime soon. But when you're in power, when you're the Prime Minister or you're one of the Prime Minister's ministers, well, funnily enough, fundraising becomes that little bit easier. Doesn't that tell us everything about what's wrong with the optics of this? If it's easier to raise money when you're in power, surely your power has something to do with why the titans of industry want to talk to you. All ministers and all prime ministers rattle their tin trying to raise money for their political party, but doing it based on the power of the office that they hold as taxpayer-funded, essentially elected officials of the bureaucracy, it's just not appropriate. Political parties are private organisations, yet they raise money out of sending out, rattling their tin, ministers and prime ministers who should really, let's be honest, be spending their time trying to work for the state, work for the voters who elected them. But this is an all too common problem in the prostitution of our democracy. The Labor conference, which has been going on, sees corporate Australia pay more than $10,000 a ticket if they want to turn up and get a little bit of access to ministers and wield a bit of influence and get their ideas in the ear of those said ministers. We saw when the budget was delivered in Canberra, the event for the government saw tickets at over $5,000 per head to attend the dinner. These things don't happen just because people love the Labor Party, any more than it happens because they love the coalition. It's about business and people with money and power accessing political power and political decision makers. The optics of it are simply terrible. Then of course there is the double standards in the media. When Pauline Hanson holidayed with Gina Rinehart, an Australian billionaire, all hell broke loose. All manner of media outlets reported on it and reported on what they thought was a concern to do with it. The double standards in the media are all too obvious. When the Prime Minister fronted ABC Radio in the aftermath of these revelations coming to light, not a single question was raised in relation to his activities at Point Piper and the personnel who were there. Why was that, I wonder? Could it be that there are different standards for Pauline Hanson, or perhaps even Conservatives, when they do these sort of things, or even versions of these sort of things, and a very different response when it's a Labor Prime Minister? So I guess the question then becomes, how do you fix this scourge on Australian democracy, this perception that we are simply selling time and access to ministers, even if it doesn't change their decision making? Well, one of the things that people might not like as a way to do this is not only disclosure provisions, which I think people would like, and quicker disclosure provisions so we know in real time, literally within days of it happening, what was done, who raised what amount of money. But on top of that, another way to address this would actually be public funding of political parties. We do some of that now. We do some of that now in terms of per vote, you get a certain number of dollars at election time, but there might be a way to broaden public funding as long as it happens at the expense of private funding. And that private funding that would have to be curtailed would also have to include the union movement as well. There is one final reality that makes the Prime Minister's participation in this fundraiser at Point Piper even more tawdry than it already appears to be. And it is this: Labor have made a lot of political mileage out of the fact that they're changing donation laws to reduce the quantum of money that any individual can donate to political parties, as well as to change some of the provisions around disclosure. But that hasn't come into effect just yet. Through utter hypocrisy, we saw previous condemnation of none other than Peter Dutton when he was the opposition leader by senior Labor figures because he was involved in a fundraiser with Sydney multimillionaire Justin Hems. Yet here we are, the Prime Minister doing what he has now done in Point Piper with the son of a Chinese billionaire, not to mention a coterie of titans of Australian business. Well, this is all happening literally months before the rules change. The rules that the Labor Party was so proud of changing to improve disclosure, improve transparency, and also reduce the value of money in politics. Well, getting in right before that happens, the Prime Minister has gone and basically sent out his time and given access for money for the Labor Party just in the lead up to when this comes into effect. It is exactly the kind of hypocrisy and double standards that voters don't like. We need political donation reforms. We need better ethical and moral standards by the political class, and they've got to get real. They're elected to represent us, yet raising money, spending all their time, so much of their time to do that for a private organisation which is their political party, it's just not right.